I'm Chris from Airwindows, and I'm showing you my new plugin, Pyewacket. Now, I'm kind of excited about this plugin, but I have to warn you, don't expect certain things out of it. This is designed to emulate sort of your old school 60s, early 70s compressors that are all over a lot of music that I like, but these are not like post 90s make everything huge and fat. Well, why don't I just show you? Check this out. This is without. This is with. Now, one thing you should notice immediately is that this plugin has a different way of handling the tendency for compressors to suck out extremely low bass. Pyewacket has a funny little capacity for hanging on to some of the transient attack, and that's what I recognized in the sounds of these compressors that I don't know if I want to say emulating. This is called Pyewacket, but it is not a model of a specific compressor. It's an airwindows style one, meaning that the voicing is similar to what you might find in a really expensive and hard to find vintage compressor. Similar, but the implementation is using concepts and techniques that allow me to do it with very, very little processing. Now, the reason this is interesting is people normally wouldn't do this. That's why I like it. This is not your usual make everything big and fat and spectacular compressor. Instead, you've got reactions kind of like, let's go with some overheads. Don't mind kick and snare. Kick and snare are another plugin that is called Point. And that's what I use on these close mics. So that'll just remain the same whatever we're listening to. But I've got some overheads here. In fact, I can take it out and go to just the raw input. And this is what we have without it. Then as we turn on Pyewacket, what it's doing is keeping a lot of the attack, a lot of the character of the sound similar, but then kind of stepping on it. There's actually a channel that I can show you which is more direct than that. It's this bass track. You can hear it's a great kind of bass. I like this bass, so I'll be picking on my bass. But it's definitely got a sort of irritating quality to it. We can step on that using Pyewacket. Now what that's doing is it's allowing some of the definition and aggression of the initial transient to remain untouched, and it does a very good job of not manipulating that sound. Because of the way that it works, the definition of the envelope of the initial transient remains very pure. It doesn't get messed with, and that's not usual. Usually that's the first thing to get messed with the compressor. But then what it's doing is it is stepping on the sort of body of the track and dropping it back so that it comes out more smoothly. And I can exaggerate that by fooling with the input gain. And what you're hearing is the whole thing is sitting there in the mix in a more stable way compared to, we've got sort of dynamics, peaks and spikes. It's kind of poking out in a funny way, but then Goes back on. I think I had it about -1 here. And that makes the result, in some ways we can demonstrate this with the whole darn mix. Let's have a look at the 2 bus. Make these overheads go away for a second. And off we go. Now if I turn this up, we'll get into a crazy zone where it's switching stuff. Now this is getting into some of the weirder ballistics. This doesn't quite go to the traffic hole in my shoe sound, but I'll abuse it a little bit more for you. I think I'll take this post boost, because one of the things about this plugin is it will cut the level when you cut it in. That's one of the ways you can tell it's working. So here, it drops right back, while still sounding pretty much like the music that you gave it. But then we do silly things with it, like this. And you can hear it squashing down on things pretty aggressively. Now when I manipulate the release, I've been told I'm supposed to get the ballistics exactly like the old Pi unit. I'm not all that interested in getting the ballistics exactly like a hardware unit, because this is a concept. This is not a clone of some hardware device. The idea is that this device, the Pi compressor, it operates on a sort of super high frequency carrier tone and pulse width modulation that's controlling the level, and I believe that lets it handle its ballistics, the attack and decay, differently than your usual compressor. And I also am handling the ballistics differently than a usual compressor. But it also has a really effective way of letting overtones and the intensity of the sound, which is also expressed by peak energy versus relative to RMS, it lets that stuff stand out an awful lot. And I was able to magnify that. Like if I turn this on and go boom, hear that it's doing a compression thing, but it's a strange manipulated compression thing. And it's sort of your problem to find where you can use this sound, given that with a usual compressor, it's going to act real differently. Like, pull it back. And you notice it's not getting all thick and fat in tone. It's doing something else. It's doing a thing about leaning the sound out. And then since I'm getting this result, this sort of semi-hole in my shoe squish result, by smashing it really violently, here's a bit of that ballistic stuff going on. That's interesting. But we can turn it down again. Now that's a weird result. And this is part of what you get when you're hammering Pyewacket and setting it up just right. You'll notice that I had the release reacting so that it swings up just in time to have that violent onset transient over this little bit of the music, and the input gain is high enough to just sort of squish it flat the instant it kicks in. And so we get this very exaggerated result. Now that's got to have a kind of pie-like quality to it. But then I can dial it back some more. Go back to those little breaks. Or speed it up. Now that's an interesting snare hit just there. And this is all the kind of stuff that you can do with a compressor and what you can do with Pyewacket. Pyewacket is like my compressor familiar. It is the sort of witch's familiar cat spirit that can do unexpected things and allow the transients to lash out in this 60s, 70s kind of way where all of the... Because the thing you got to understand about classic mixes like those that the Pye compressor was used in is all the way up to the mid-70s, the transient energy over RMS was huge. Like on albums like Boston's first album and so on and so forth, it's like 20 dB of crest factor, 20 dB of peak energy over RMS. We don't ever see anything like that these days. And that's why I have to go into the explanation about what Pyewacket is and how it works. This plugin doesn't push RMS over peak. This plugin does the clamping down on the body of the sound and the compression and so on. It evens things out, but without smushing the, rounding off the transients and reshaping them so that it's all thickness and fatness. I have a recent plugin density for just that purpose. And if you want thickness and fatness, you don't even need to worry about Pyewacket, just use that. But with those, even modern plugins, I've heard a comparison of what's purported to be a genuine Pye compressor and a software emulation. And I mean specifically emulation. It's not like this, where it's the sort of overall concept and dimension of the plugin. It's attempting to literally clone the thing. And the software is terrible at hanging on to that transient energy. And the hardware, I bet it was pretty measurable even. The hardware was hanging on to the transients super well. Well, this hangs on to the transients amazingly. Dial it back a little bit. Remember, this is still compressing. Quite a lot, really. And then, so we can attenuate going in here. But we're still getting some of the quality out of this sucker. And then again, speeding it up. I was thinking of calling this, speeding it up, calling it fullness or something like that, because essentially what's happening is you're manipulating its capacity for leaning sounds out. Let's go and investigate some of the other tones here as well. I'll put this back to where I had it, more or less. And let's look at these little guys. The guitar and the synthesizer sound. Now this is another way of handling the we're sort of shaping the sound and pushing fairly hard into the compressor So what we've got is, when the raw is like this, we're hearing this very direct. I don't even have the bus compressor on there. Also remember, if you have channel compressors and bus compressors, you're combining the effect of both. They multiply rather than just adding. So bear that in mind when you're handling the gain staging of a big complicated mix with a lot of stuff going on in it, because if you're doing the big complicated mix and everything has its little compression so that it sounds big and sort of expanded, and then the bus also has compression and sounds sort of big and expanded, you multiply them together and it becomes kind of ridiculous. Everything is like, and having a good mix where the intentions of instruments and sounds balance means not completely overwhelming things with the sound of, say, a compressor. That said, let's go back to here. This is no compressor, and then you can pretty clearly hear the way it's flattening stuff out. Let's bounce back so that we have more time. Like, I can turn these off. And you should be able to hear how the weight and body of these sounds sort of comes forward. But then when I kick the compressor in, and it's on a pretty slow release, and I'm giving it about 2 dB of gain, which compensates for the dropback in volume that you get by just cutting it in. What's happening is the definition of the onset of the note is still there and pretty much exactly as it was before. There's some technical reasons for that, which is why it really keeps the attack preserved more than I think any other compressor is likely to do. It's using a factor of my density plugin, actually. It's using the negative density factor as a total cancellation and also dialing the volume of it back a little bit. So when you blend that in, what you get is lack of effect on the super loud noises, and that includes transients, that includes energy, that even includes low bass frequencies. And then as stuff falls into the sort of mid-range, it gets sucked out very aggressively. And then as the compression release brings things back up, it gets more full, so it's like it's coming forward. And the result is like... Let's just have this for a second. Now if I take this out, and if I speed up the release, what we're going to get is sort of the fullness and body of it is kind of coming out around the result. It becomes kind of loud when you push it that hard. Go back a sec. The interesting thing here is how little it sounds like I'm doing anything. We got a lot of compression going on, but the dynamic behavior of it is pretty darn normal. This is a synthesizer with a filter. It's a Voxbox, and essentially what it's doing as we do this is just flattening it out again, and it's not altering the color of it super much even when you're absolutely slamming it. Let's go back to the 2.0 because I have other examples that are more interesting when you're simply beating them up, like overheads. Back to the overheads that we started with. Now I've got somewhat of a faster release of these guys. So what we're going to do is we'll drop them back to where we're clearly not doing anything too aggressive with them, and slam them. You can hear the attacks coming through, and you can also hear the way that it's like compressing. If I cut it right down, the slowest release is demonstrating to us what we get with just raw attack, and the release isn't coming up at all. So this is showing us pretty much nothing but what it sounds like when you're hearing only the front edge of the sound. Now, as we speed this up a little bit, we start hearing a little bit more of things. And it's really showing some of the sustainy sounds. But again, our attack is poking right out and being very aggressive. Then, going beyond that, we can get a super fast attack, which is very dirty and sort of crunchy. And I think we had it at 0.6. I had that set up so that these overheads didn't do too insane of a exaggerated compressy thing. Although that's kind of cool too. Instead, it's just sort of handling itself. And again, Pyewacket isn't necessarily meant to just be smashed until it's doing the traffic hole in my shoe thing, because it is not an exact model of the classic and impossible to find Pye compressor. It's doing similar things, and it's especially doing things with the attack transient that other compressors simply don't do, because they don't keep the loud parts of the attack transient around, ignoring the compressed quality. And mine does. All of the loud sounds are actually being kept in the signal by the density algorithm. Here, what we can do is dial it back to where it's not squishing so hard. And you can sort of make stuff blend in this way, and I think what I may have done, in fact, is, yeah. And here is our raw sound. So I've got this set up to no change at all. That's a good fill to demonstrate things with. This is raw. And the release is on 0.6. Then if I turn it on, or we can give it a goose like here. It's definitely a derpy fill, I gotta admit, but if you can hear the derpiness of it expressing itself real aggressively, that's doing it right. Now what I'll do is slow down the release really far so we can hear what that sounds like as well. And with the release slowed down so much, it's going to step on the body of the sound much harder. You compare that with the uncompressed sound here. And for the heck of it, let's beat this up. Okay, that's fun, although it may be a little bit too violent. Let's tone this right down again. I'm not going to play that fill anymore because it's just too much of a train wreck. But what I will do is slow the release even farther. Now this is pretty much just all attack transient, but it's being controlled in a very tidy way. That was a little strange, but see, this is a compressor that you can work with that's going to preserve some of the aggression of tracks. Like, you don't have the same thing here if you just take the compressor out. You have all of the impact, but you don't have the coloration there. Instead, it's just a raw track. But then if we turn this on, you can hear it having a very big effect. It's having a very exaggerated effect, but it's using the attack transients that the algorithm is retaining, because remember, it's not cutting back to silence quite. Instead, it's cutting back to this very sort of RMS removed sound, and it's leaving the I've been explaining this. How about I just demonstrate some of the things? Also, one thing to notice about this is that with the individual tracks, these are called Pyewacket mono because the stereo track, Pyewacket stereo, or just Pyewacket all by itself, is automatically 2 channels because it's using a linked stereo mode, so that it'll have a smoother behavior. Now, let's get back to this crazy. Oh, and one more thing to demonstrate is this reverb sound. And you can put Pyewacket on the reverb, and it does an interesting thing there too. That's squishing down on the reverb real aggressively. That's what it sounds like without it. And this is just Pyewacket beating up the reverb very aggressively to the point where it's getting that strange, vaguely grungy sound to it. We'll bring it up a little bit. You could do amusing things with this, but dial it back until it's still having its effect, but it almost sounds like it doesn't. You got this without the effect. And then you kick the effect in. And it's positioning things in the soundstage in a very controlled way. And our end result is like... I had this pushed a little more than I needed. And I had that at 0.6. So Pyewacket allows us to make a mix in which you're controlling the presentation of all of these sounds. Like if there's a wolf note or something comes out a little bit louder, it will step on that in a very transparent way. It'll make it blend in with the other notes, but all of the definition, aggression, and attack of every sonic event, up to and including little tremolos of a vocal or something, just jumps out super aggressively, all while the background of the music, the space that the music is in, sits back. It's not like post-90s everything coming forward at you at all times. There's a relaxation to it. And the result is kind of like, go to 145. Here's what we got here, and then I'm going to switch it over to no Pyewacket, and you'll hear what it sounds like in a little burst. No Pyewacket. How quick sonic events can happen. And that's not just transients of the treble variety. Low frequencies can come through as well. Everything kind of sits in a useful place and moves right. Pyewacket is audio unit, Mac and PC VST. It is free because I developed these things hooked up to a Patreon system, which is going to grow to the point where I'm doing as well as I was doing with commercial plugins. I've decided I want to let people have these tools rather than working only for wealthy musicians who are willing to throw a lot of money at gear. Maybe gear they don't even need. Now, that also simplifies things as far as me making plugins, because I can make stuff like Pyewacket. I need this. This is getting the sound that I want, and I haven't been able to get the sound that this makes in any other way. However, if you don't need this one, well, you might want to join the Patreon anyway, because odds are I'll do another one next week, or then another one that I do will be useful to you. However, for those who are interested in this strange old compressor design that I think may have gone out of fashion and not been constantly reissued and reused over the years, I think it maybe went out of fashion because it doesn't do the super fat big sound. The sounds that it makes are kind of small and contained. As you turn it up and make it kick in, It steps down on the body of the sound and confines it to where it's sort of sitting in one place. That's very useful for a compressor to do, but people are used to always being able to cut in an effect, and it has to do what it does, but also make stuff bigger and fatter. Like I have a very popular plugin, Pressure, and I'll tell you a little secret about Pressure. Pressure is a nifty airwindows compression algorithm, and that's another good building block. But something you might not know about Pressure is on the end of Pressure after the compression algorithm, it has a stage of the density algorithm just to saturate the output. And it's been hugely successful. Everybody seems to love the Pressure plugin. And I'll tell you why. It's because they get their compression. It's very smooth compression. It works very well as far as what it does. And then on the end of that, you have this saturation effect, as if I was modeling some kind of hardware device and going, oh, well, at the end of this is the FETs that distort. And so I have to build that into the... Now, often I would rather design plugins so that you have that as a separate box. It should be sitting as a separate plugin, so if you don't want to do that thing to it, you don't have to. And that's part of what's going on with Pyewacket, is it's balking that tendency for getting stuff to sell in the market by making everything have to be bigger and fatter and thicker than everything else. I think that's crap. I don't think that's useful to a mixing engineer. It's just, it's a cheap date. It's a cheap date because you cut in the effect and it's automatically bigger and fatter. Here, I can even demonstrate that with the Pyewacket mix here. I'll go to airwindows. It's just a list of many things, many of which will be coming out, but I go to Pressure 4, it's the most recent one, and we've replaced Pyewacket with Pressure. Mewiness is for the full very mew behavior. And we'll go back into here and even cut the output gain back a little bit. And as we turn it up, switching, but you can hear everything kind of coming forward, and you know, as fun as that might be, you go from here to like this. That might be fun, but big difference in these behaviors. If you've got this one going on, it makes stuff come forward. Hear that kick coming real forward. Everything is more in your face. Now you kick in Pyewacket. Everything sets back, except for the sort of aura around things, the transient attacks and stuff. That's still defined. That's still clear. But it's making the whole mix behave very differently. So people sometimes ask, Chris, why do you have 16 different kinds of low-pass filters? What are you doing with 5 different compressors and 27 different distortion things? Well, firstly, because they all sound different, and secondly, because they can sound this different. Forward, back, get him similar. Forward, back. Forward, back. That's why to have multiple kinds of compressors. That's why to have multiple kinds of distortions. The way these things can act can be wildly, wildly different. And this is why we do things like hunt down, well, I say we do things. I don't do this. It's not the kind of thing I can do. Some people do things like hunt down different kinds of $10,000 compressors, like your Fairchild, like a Pi, and put them into action because analog gear does sound kind of awesome. I mean, heck, I can show you some. Here, check it out. I just pulled this out of a piece of equipment that I had. This is my old guitar amplifier preamp. I run it into a pretty much the power stage of a guitar amp, or indeed a even a hi-fi amp. I've got stuff recorded with this running into a hi-fi amp. Analog stuff can sound awesome. This is a great sounding little preamp. But you can put stuff into digital forms and still get wild big differences depending on how you do it. And Pyewacket and Pressure, despite the fact that Pressure has that output stage, are not CPU munching monsters of emulating every little capacitor and stuff, because I don't feel that's really very useful. I think it's overprocessing. Instead, they're just wildly, wildly different styles of compressor, and they're both free. I hope you enjoyed them, and there's going to be a link where you can go and download Pyewacket, and you follow my websites and stuff around, and you'll get to a place where you can download every VST ported plugin that I have put out into the free world all together in a zip file. Have fun.